All right. Well, I know, Zane, you sent out a reminder, so maybe we'll have some latecomers trickling in as the meeting goes on. But I want to get started in the interest of time. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Philadelphia Small Business Licensing for New Entrepreneurs. I'm Evie Cruz from Philadelphia VIP, which provides free legal assistance to low-income Philadelphians, including small business owners and nonprofit leaders. This workshop will prepare you to seek out and obtain the licenses you require to legally operate your business. Of course, there are several more steps to starting a business, from incorporating as an LLC to drafting your first contracts to signing a commercial lease. If you do find yourself in need of assistance with one of these legal processes and cannot afford an attorney, feel free to use our application. I will put it in the chat. You can also send me an email. I will also put it in the chat. A bit of housekeeping up front. You'll see that this meeting is being recorded for future use. If you are not comfortable showing your face, you are free to leave your camera off for the duration of the meeting. I do believe we'll have time for questions at the end, so you can put them in the chat or raise your hand at the end of the presentation so that Zane can answer your questions. Now, I want to introduce my co-host and presenter for the day, Zane Johnson, the managing attorney and founder of MZA Legal. Zane started the firm in 2019 with the simple intention of using his legal knowledge and skills to empower everyday people. He provides high-quality legal solutions designed to help new entrepreneurs grow their business, minimize risk, and take back their time. And with that, I will let him take over and share his wisdom with you all today. Thank you, Zane.
Awesome. Thank you, Evie. And thank you, everyone, for joining me this morning. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to present on this topic. I know when I reached out to Evie to talk about maybe partnering to put something together on small business licensing, it was something that was on both of our radars, is something that new entrepreneurs are struggling with, but it's really hard to find a great way to put together some sort of resource that kind of meets everyone's needs. So this is our first attempt at putting something like that together, and hopefully creating a resource that's useful for everyone in terms of basically clarifying, the process of getting your business properly licensed when you're just starting up, and just making sure that you're keeping everything legal. So without any further ado, I'll kind of jump into it with just a couple of housekeeping notes in terms of the presentation itself. So as Evie mentioned, it is the presentation today is being recorded, so you can definitely keep yourself on mute, and keep yourself off of, keep your camera off if you do not want to appear on the recording. The recording will be made available at a later date. But if this, at the end of the day, I do want this to be a kind of back and forth conversational sort of presentation. So at any point, if you have a question, comment, thoughts, whatever it may be, definitely feel free to take yourself off of mute and jump in where you see a break in the action. But just remember to put yourself back on mute, so that we don't hear any background noise that might be disturbing. A handout will be sent out immediately following the presentation today. Just basically recapping what we go over. And if you have any follow-up questions, as Evie mentioned, her information will be available in terms of reaching out to Philly VIP for additional free legal services that your business might need. And I'm also always available in case you need to reach out and have any follow-up questions about the presentation or anything business related. So Evie did a great job of introducing me, actually, so I don't have too much to add to that. As she mentioned, my name is Zane Johnson. I'm the founder and managing attorney of MZA Legal. We're a Black-owned virtual law firm based in Philadelphia. I actually live in Maryland. That's a long story that I won't go all the way into. But like I said, I just appreciate the opportunity to be spending a little bit of time with everyone. I was away last week and then brought COVID back. So I'm glad that I'm in a condition to be able to present, and thank goodness for virtual Zoom chats and virtual presentations, right, where I can share this information. But my goal and my mission is all about empowering new entrepreneurs. One of the things that I noticed as an attorney is that there are a lot of ways for people to start businesses, and that sort of opening up of access to being able to start a business has really, just like I said, opened up access to people being able to start new businesses. And likewise, I want to be able to open up access to legal services and legal solutions for new entrepreneurs. And so that's what I'm here for. So as I mentioned before, feel free to reach out to me. But without any further ado, I'll jump right into the topic for today. And I'm going to ask for a little bit of audience participation. So whether you want to put that in the chat or whether you want to jump in and take yourself off mute, I'm just curious for those of you who are here and those of you who are still trickling in, what comes to mind when you think about business licensing? Any thoughts whatsoever? Any words? Like I said, you can throw them in the chat. You can jump off of mute. We got government and red tape. Definitely, definitely. Any other thoughts, feelings? Well, no problem. We're still waking up this morning. That's not an issue. So I did come up with, or I came up with some things that I commonly hear from new business owners in terms of what they think about business licensing. And a lot of things that come up is confusion. I don't know if anyone has ever visited the city's website in terms of trying to figure out what their business licensing requirements are. Excuse me, I'm getting a call. What their business licensing requirements are, but it's definitely not the easiest website to navigate in terms of figuring out what applies to your business. Sometimes it feels like you need to go through every single license or permit or certificate that they offer or require just to figure out what might apply to you. Pain in the butt is something that comes up. Intimidation in terms of everything that's out there and not necessarily knowing what to do. A lot of people feel like they're out there on their own. And all of this can kind of create some feelings of anxiety around business licensing. And one of the things that I feel like I see relatively often with folks is that sometimes when they're starting their new business, they'll come to that business licensing part in their checklist or their to-do list, and then they'll push it further down the list because they say, I don't really feel like dealing with this right now. And so today's workshop is really about helping everyone to gain some clarity so that you don't feel like this is a task that you need to push further down the list. All right. There is help out there for you. There are resources available. But most importantly, I want to give you a way of thinking about and thinking through business licensing, permitting, and certificates that are out there and that are required for different industries and different business activities. I want to be able to kind of give you a roadmap or a playbook to kind of understand and conceptualize these different permits and business licenses that exist so that you can kind of figure it out on your own, but you also know where to go if you need help, right? So it's all about being able to kind of manage this monster that is business licensing when it comes to opening a business in the city of Philadelphia. So where are we going today? What's our roadmap? So we're going to start off with just a general section about understanding business licensing. Where do we start? Where does this fit in our journey in terms of starting our business? And then we're going to move and hone in on kind of common business licensing requirements. So as I mentioned, or if I didn't mention already, there are a lot of different business licenses and permits and certificates that are out there. There are hundreds. And so we won't have time to kind of go through a list of all the ones that are out there and what you'll need for each one. But I'm going to go through a couple of hypothetical examples to kind of give you an idea of, what sorts of business licenses and permits might apply to your business based on the different activities that you're involved in. And then at the end, we're just going to do a little bit of recap of what we've learned and then open it up for questions. So hopefully we'll be able to get through it all. And again, if you have any questions as we're going through, feel free to just jump right in. So business licensing basics. Let's start first of all with what I mean by business license, because it's not necessarily clear. And so when I talk about a business license in the context of this presentation today, I'm really talking about any type of license, permit, or certificate that a government entity requires for a business in order to legally operate. All right. And so these include things that you might not think of as necessarily being a business license, or they might be licenses or permits that are also required outside of a business context, right? So for example, if I am running if I'm a landlord and I own an apartment building, I'm going to need a license to be able to rent those apartments out to people. Likewise, if I live in a building, but I want to rent out a room short term, I'm also going to need a license to rent out that room short term, right? So I might not be thinking of myself as a business owner in that context of I live in a house and I have a room that I can let out and I want to do that on an Airbnb short term, right? I might not be thinking of myself in that context as a business, but I still need a license for that, right? And so I want to, in order to be able to clear any confusion about what I'm talking about in terms of business licenses, because I'm going to talk about some things where you might say, hey, that doesn't necessarily sound like a business license. It just kind of sounds like a permit related to some sort of activity. But a lot of these licenses, permits, certificates are things that are needed in the context of being able to start, own, and operate a business in the city of Philadelphia. So I just want to sort of clarify what I mean when I say business license. Where does business licensing fit in the timeline in terms of starting your business? We obviously are going to start at the beginning with an idea and then moving forward into business planning. After you've created your business entity and opened your business bank account, and with everything that comes in with creating an entity, including getting your EIN number and putting together all of those foundational documents that really solidify the existence of your business. Next comes in business licensing, all right? And this is going to be before you start to or as you start to solidify some of those initial contracts and also secure some of your intellectual property. Obviously, there are some other steps in here that may apply, but I'm looking at this from a legal perspective as an attorney. Here are the things that I'm looking to do for folks from a legal perspective to set a solid foundation for your business. There are obviously going to be other things in terms of branding and things that go in your business planning and marketing and building a team. There are a lot of different things that go into that. But this is where business licensing falls in terms of creating a solid legal foundation for your business. So what type of business licenses are out there? Well, I actually went through prior to putting together this presentation, which was actually really helpful in terms of putting this all together, and I went through and looked at all the different business licenses. I had an intern who was helping me kind of put this together because I thought, why don't I put together a guide that can actually help walk people through all the business licenses that they need, which is when I, learned and figured out there's so much here. And these are all the categories that I was able to break everything out into. The city's website has it broken out into its own categories. But amongst these 30 some odd categories of business related activities, there are hundreds of different permits, licenses, certificates. And so how do we kind of make sense of what applies to us? What do we need to apply for, right? The way that I tend to break it down for folks is you want to think about business licenses in terms of two factors. Number one is business activity. So what sort of activities is your business engaged in? And then number two, where is your business located? All right. And so keeping in mind that your business may have multiple locations, right? Like you may have offices, in one state or in one county. You may have offices in multiple counties or multiple states. But these are the two factors that are going to determine what business licensing requirements your business has. All right. And in Pennsylvania, as well as across the country, as far as I'm aware, most business licensing occurs at the local level and will differ county by county. All right. And so if your business is located in Montgomery County, you're going to have different business licensing requirements than if your business is located in Philadelphia. All right. And so this changes, the business licensing requirements that your business is going to have, and also what that process looks like in terms of applying for business licenses wherever your business may be located. All right. A couple of things I want to point out about that is, again, the number one factor to think about is your business activity. And so even though business licensing for the most part happens on the local level, there are certain industries and business activities which may subject you to business licensing requirements at either the federal or state level. And I'm not really going to be covering those too in depth this morning, but I do want to point out that some of those things, for example, on the federal level, if you are importing and exporting goods, if you have a truck that is over, I think it's like 55,000 pounds, certain business activities are going to mean that you are required to register for different licenses at the federal level. Likewise, at the state level, there are certain business activities or business related activities that are regulated at the state level, such as the sale of alcohol. If you run a business that sells or distributes alcohol for consumption, or also like if you have a daycare, you're going to have some things at the state level that you'll have to take care of. If you run a home health care facility, et cetera. So there are business activities that will subject you to business licensing requirements at the federal and state level. This presentation will focus primarily on the local level in Philadelphia, but that is something to be aware of, okay? So before the last thing I want to cover before we get into talking about specific business licenses that may be required for businesses in Philadelphia, and kind of going through some examples to kind of give you a clearer picture of what that looks like for businesses in practice. I just wanted to point out some of the resources that are out there to help you with figuring out what your business licensing requirements are and help you with applying for your business licenses. All right. And so for me, I always recommend, number one, if you have a mentor or a friend or someone else, another professional in your industry who you can turn to for advice, I think that that's going to be a great place to go to get some information in terms of business licensing. Number one, hopefully they'll, have gone through the processes themselves, and they'll be able to say, here are the things that you need to do to make sure that you're properly licensed. Here are the things that you need to keep up with on an annual basis or on a quarterly basis or however long. But in addition to that, because they've walked through it practically in the same sort of position that you're going to be in as a business owner, they'll probably have a little bit of insight that others who aren't in your industry would not have, right? So like certain things that you want to put in an application or certain things that you want to make sure you have, or certain, service providers who you want to go to, they'll have different recommendations, tips, warnings to help you avoid some pitfalls that might slow you down or might end up in causing you some issues when you go to apply for those licenses, permits, etc. All right. In addition to that, there are plenty of other resources that are out there, free resources that are designed to help entrepreneurs and business owners in Philadelphia. There's the Office of Business Services, which I was actually unaware of how much they actually do, but Evie was able to hit me to the fact that they do a lot of work, or they offer to do a lot of work to support new entrepreneurs in terms of giving them information on what they need, particularly in this area when it comes to business licensing. So they're a great resource. Also, community development corporations and other nonprofit organizations such as Philadelphia VIP are out there to help provide support, to connect you with people who can provide you with support, right? And so if you're not familiar with your local community development corporation, definitely get familiar, find out who that is. In the handout, there's going to be a resource where you can go online and find the closest community development corporations to you. But they have all different types of resources that are available, not just in terms of business licensing. So you definitely want to familiarize yourself with your local CDC. The BRIC, the Business Resource and Information Center at the Philadelphia Library downtown, is another good resource. Their resource librarians can probably be helpful to you in terms of getting the information that you need on business licensing. Your local elected officials office is also a good resource. They have staff there who are, there to help constituents within the community. And so if you go into your local elected officials office, there should be someone there who is, willing to help you figure out what business licensing requirements you have. And SCORE Philadelphia is another great resource. I'm not sure, SCORE might be, if I was going to say out of all of these resources, SCORE might be the last one that I would turn to, not because SCORE isn't great. SCORE is absolutely awesome. They offer a ton of free resources, but SCORE might be the most difficult one to get in with because they have a limited number of mentors and it takes them a little while to kind of place people. And so if you have an immediate need in terms of business licensing, it might be kind of difficult to get that immediate need met in the short term if you are turning to SCORE for help with that. So SCORE is a great resource, but if you're pressed for time, probably want to look at some of the other resources first. So now let's jump into some of the common business licensing requirements. And in Philadelphia, any discussion about common business licensing requirements has to start with talking about a commercial activity license. All right, in Philadelphia, as far as I know, and Evie can correct me if she knows otherwise or if this is incorrect, but as far as I know, Philadelphia is the only county that has a general business license requirement. I'm not sure if there are any other counties in Pennsylvania that do, but your commercial activity license is basically a general business license, and all for-profit businesses that are operating in Philadelphia are required to have one. The good news is it's free. You only need to obtain it once, and it's relatively easy to obtain. In terms of your commercial activity license, one of the questions that I get often, especially in today's, in a kind of post-pandemic world, or we're still in the pandemic, but as we move towards a post-pandemic world, and there are more virtual businesses, virtual side hustles, I get questions from a lot of folks who, technically they do business in Philadelphia, right? Like maybe they're operating an online business from their home in Philadelphia, but most of their business is national or maybe even international. So they're not necessarily serving customers or clients in Philadelphia. And I often get asked, do I still need to have a commercial activity license? And the answer to that question is yes. All right. So you still need that commercial activity license because you are operating your business from the county of Philadelphia. And that is what, in that case, makes that requirement that you have to have a commercial activity license. But that requirement also applies to businesses that are located outside of Philadelphia, that are operating within the city, right? So if you are let's say you're a business that does service, or let's say you do commercial cleaning. I'll use a concrete example. Let's say you do commercial cleaning. Your business is headquartered in Chester County, but you serve several clients in Philadelphia. You still need to have a commercial activity license because you're providing those services within the city. All right. And so you want to make sure that if you're operating your business in the city, which I'm assuming everyone is, because that was kind of the basis of today's workshop, you'll need your commercial activity license. And again, it's not that difficult to get. There will be some information on the handout that we send out about getting your commercial activity license. But in terms of the basic requirements, you'll need your EIN number or your employer identification number. Or if your business if you're a sole proprietor without any employees, a social security number. You will need your city tax ID number, which will be information on the handout as well in terms of how you get that, because that's definitely an important piece of information that you'll need in terms of any business licenses, permits, et cetera. And then you'll also need information on the majority owners of the company, or if it's just you, just your own information in terms of contact information and so on and so forth. All right. One important thing to note is that certain businesses, instead of having a commercial activity license, will have to get an activity license number. So it's a similar thing, but it's for nonprofits, live-in landlords who are renting who are renting 3 or more units, and those seeking a vacant property permit or vacant property license. All right. And as I said, the handout that we send out will have some more information on getting your commercial activity license. But one of the things that I want to make sure that I make clear is that there are a couple of different ways to get it. You can get it online, which is a relatively quick and painless process as far as city processes go. So using the Eclipse system, you can apply for the commercial activity license, and you can also schedule a Zoom appointment with licensing, and they can, actually help walk you through that process if it's something that you need help with. You can also do it in person if that's something that you prefer, by scheduling an appointment to go into the Permit and Licensing Center at the Municipal Services Building downtown. So I want to, like I said, there are a lot of different permit, licensing, certificate requirements out there. And so we won't have enough time to kind of go through everything that exists. But I felt like the most helpful way for me to kind of illustrate and provide more clarity on what specific business licensing requirements different businesses might have was to put together some hypotheticals and kind of go through them. So the first one that we have is a virtual consulting business, right? And so let's say you're starting a virtual consulting business. You'll be doing most of your work from your apartment in West Philadelphia, and your clients are all over the country. None of them are located in Philadelphia. So what business licenses will you need based on this very simple fact pattern? And so as we covered, you're going to need a commercial activity license, just as any business located or operating in the city of Philadelphia will. And as I explained, even if your business is completely virtual and you're not servicing any businesses in the city of Philadelphia, if you're doing your work from Philadelphia, you still need that commercial activity license. All right. One of the things that I want to point out is that if you're a member of a regulated profession, you will have obviously additional licensing requirements in terms of your professional licensing. And so there are, for example, if you start an LLC, if you want to form your business as an LLC, and you are part of 9 different professions, including lawyers, doctors, optometrists, I think it's chiropractors, and there are 5 others. If you're part of one of those listed or enumerated professions, you'll have to have a professional limited liability company, which requires you to pay additional fees every year with the state, and also file a document stating that your licensing is up to date. You'll have certain licensing requirements that you have to keep up with, probably at the state level, depending on what profession you're in, regarding your professional licensure. And so that's not something that I'm going to go too deep in depth on today, unless anyone has any specific questions. But most likely, if you're in a regulated profession where you need a license to practice that profession, it's something that you probably already know about and you're probably already aware of the requirements. All right. But if you're not, make sure that you avail yourself of the information about the licensing requirements within your particular profession. Oh, and I actually did not finish this slide. That's an oversight on my part. But the one thing that I did want to point out, again, remember that most licensing is done on a local level. So one of the questions that I get asked often is, will I have to apply for any licenses anywhere else besides Philadelphia? And that really depends on the level to which you're operating in other counties or other states. If you are maintaining business operations in a county, like if you have an office or you have employees who are working in a certain county, or who are you have a business space that is open to customers or clients in a county or in a different state, you'll definitely want to look into, and most likely will need to register for business licenses that apply to your business in those counties or in those states. But if you're running a virtual business, and you're just operating from your home in Philadelphia, and you're not doing anything else in any other county other than, maybe you've got clients who are located there, but you're not doing anything in terms of specifically operating within that county or within that state in a way that creates a sufficient nexus, is the legal term that we use. And I was really trying to avoid using a legal term that holds no sort of practical meaning in every day. But basically, if you're operating a virtual business and you're just operating in Philadelphia, that's the only place where you need to worry about business licensing at. All right. If you're operating in other counties or operating in other states in a consistent manner, you'll need to think about registering for licenses in those counties or those states as well. So hypothetical number 2. All right. So let's say you're looking to make some additional income and you start a business as a handyman, handywoman, and you are going to be doing simple home repair. Oh my goodness. Sorry about that. You're going to be doing simple home repair, such as painting, maybe tiling and grout work, power washing, clean outs, fixing appliances inside the city and in surrounding counties. Your business won't have a physical location, and you'll primarily be working on and in single family homes. So in this situation, what business licenses are going to be required? Well, of course, number 1, we have your commercial activity license. That's a given. You'll also need to register. This is an example of one of those professions or industries where you'll need to register for a license on the state level. So if you're a home improvement contractor, you will need to register at the state level as a home improvement contractor. And this is also one of those areas, and this is really to kind of highlight at different levels, where if you're in certain industries, there are going to be higher levels of licensing requirements that are enforced on your business. All right. And so doing any sort of contracting work, construction work are going to be great examples of that. And so if you're really just doing kind of home improvement, basic work, you obviously need to register at the state level, but you may not need to register also at the city level. All right. And so at the state level, you need to register for that home improvement contractor license. But at the city level, if you're only doing kind of basic home repair work, you won't need a contractor's license with the city. If you're only working on 1 and 2 family homes, and you're not doing work that requires a specialized trade license. And there are some examples that are listed here on the slide. If you are doing more involved contracting work, like you're doing contracting work on commercial properties, or that requires a specialized trade license, or you're doing general contractors work, where you're going to be hiring people who do this type of work, or working with commercial properties, you will need a contractor's license at the city level as well as at the state level. All right. And so this is one of those examples where the work that you're doing in the industry that you're in will determine to some level what licensing requirements you have. Any sort of construction, home repair, building remodeling, any sort of business or industry where you're doing work on a building, is going to bring in higher levels of business licensing requirements. All right. And so that's definitely something to be aware of. Again, as I mentioned before, some of the other examples are going to be daycares, healthcare facilities or home health aid companies. Also, if you're running a food business, if you're running a vending business or a business that's going to be doing vending on a sidewalk or street or public thoroughfare, then you need to make sure that you're aware that your industry, your business activity is going to subject you to some higher levels of business licensing requirements. So on to our last, our third and final hypothetical here. And so let's say you want to open up a coffee shop in your neighborhood in South Philadelphia. You're planning on purchasing a vacant building, and the vacant building formerly operated as an antique store up until the start of the pandemic. Excuse me. So the building's going to require a lot of work before your grand opening, including installing new signage and a small kitchen. All right. And so with this hypothetical, you're going to have a lot of different permitting and licensing requirements in order to get everything up to speed and ready to go for your grand opening, right? So of course we start with your commercial activity license. But one of the things that I wanted to point out with this hypothetical and compare and contrast it to the first two that we did is that because you have a physical location, you're going to have some more permitting requirements in terms of making sure that that physical location is up to zoning codes, making sure that that physical location, if there are any changes that you want to make to the building, that, you know, from a zoning perspective, but also from a building perspective, a construction perspective, you're able to get the building permits that you need, that you have the required certificate of occupancy. If you're going to be having a certain number of people within the building, believe it's over 50, if I remember the number correctly. But that also you'll have to submit a plan review. In this case, because it's a food related business, and again, with that being a more heavily regulated industry, you're also going to have to go through the process of getting your licensing to be able to serve food at the location, right? And so that starts with submitting a plan review to the Department of Public Health. It also includes getting a food preparation and serving license. And then depending on how you will be serving or selling food, there may be additional licenses that you'll have to get, such as if you're selling prepackaged food versus if you are preparing food for folks to eat at your actual business location. And then in addition, because it's a coffee shop, of course, and a coffee shop, you may want to have some, you know, a couple tables and a couple chairs out on the sidewalk, you know, just to give it that nice coffee shop feel. And so if that's something that you want to do, there's going to be an additional license for that, right? And so this hypothetical is really just highlighting again, you know, how the business activity, but not just the business industry, kind of dictates the licensing requirements that you're going to have, right? So if you have a physical location, zoning is going to be a big issue that you need to pay attention to, because you want to make sure, especially if it's a new building that you're moving into, that the location is properly zoned, or that you have the proper permission to be able to operate the business that you're planning to operate. If you're moving into a business location that was previously operating the same sort of business that you are going to be operating, then you probably already got the zoning approvals that you need to be able to do that. But if you're changing the use, you're definitely going to need a zoning permit. And then even something as simple as, you know, putting a sign out in front of the store, you're going to need to make sure that from a zoning perspective, that you have the proper permits to be able to install that signage, whether it's something on the building, which will most likely definitely need a zoning permit, unless it's, you know, a minor change to something that already exists, or even, something as simple as putting a sign in the window. Depending on how large that sign is, you may need to apply for a zoning permit regarding that. And again, in regards to making changes to the actual building, you're going to need permits regarding making changes to the building. Now, the contractors you're working with will most likely or hopefully should be able to help you with pulling those permits and taking care of those permitting situations. But it's something that you want to make sure that you're aware of, and that you take care of ahead of time, because at the end of the day, if the proper permits aren't pulled, you're going to be the one left holding the bag as the owner of the building or as the tenant in the building, because it's going to end up slowing up or potentially preventing you from doing business, right? And so don't think that it's the contractor's responsibility, and so I don't have to worry about it. I've talked with people who've reached out to me before who've had questions or issues regarding making changes to property that they owned, and they were using for business purposes, but having issues getting the permit, or having worked with a contractor who didn't pull the permit and the work is already done, and maybe now whatever was done, if it was electrical or plumbing, the walls are all closed up, and so they can't get the inspection, and so they're wondering, what do I do? That's not the situation you want to be in. Make sure that you get it taken care of ahead of time. Talk with your contractor about their plan to make sure that all of the work that's being done to the building, if you're going to have a physical location, that all of that work is taken care of. And this applies as well if you're a landlord or if you're involved in real estate investing. This is going to apply equally to your business industry as well, in terms of the zoning and building permits that you'll need. So what have we learned? Hopefully, I helped provide a little bit of clarity to you in terms of what sort of business licensing requirements are out there. Try not to feel overwhelmed. I realize that it's possible that what I threw at you is just kind of making you feel like, well, Zane, it feels like you're just telling me that there's a lot out there, and I tried my best to not make you feel that way. But what I really want you to hopefully walk away with out of the information in the presentation is that, number one, every business needs a commercial activity license. And for a lot of businesses, especially if you don't have a physical location, that is going to be the main and only business licensing requirement that you have to worry about. All right. So if you don't have a physical location, if you're not in a heavily regulated industry, most likely that's going to be the only business licensing requirement that you have. But again, make sure that you check based on your industry and the business activity that you're involved in. And hopefully the other thing that you walked away with is knowing that there are resources out there in terms of being able to figure out what your business licensing requirements are. All right. And so even if you feel like, okay, none of the hypotheticals necessarily applied to the type of business that I'm in, and they don't necessarily give me specific clarity on what I will need, know that there are resources available to you. And again, the handout that we send out after the workshop will, give you something that you can refer back on to be able to figure out exactly what's going to apply to you. All right. So with that being said, we've got about a little over 10 minutes left. So that means that I breezed through this at about the speed that I wanted to. So are there any questions, comments, concerns? Definitely feel free to just put it out there. Like I said, any questions that you may have about your specific situation that maybe I can help answer. And also just any thoughts about the workshop or presentation in general. As I mentioned, this is the first time that we're giving this workshop. And so any feedback or thoughts that you may have that you want to just be able to provide off the top in terms of what information was helpful and what you feel like you need more information on would be useful to me moving forward. So what questions do we have? I see there's one in the chat. So do you need a zoning license for a home-based business? So that depends on what type of business it is, and what you're going to be doing at your home. So if it's consulting, ghostwriting, so I'll put it this way. I think probably the best way for me to break it into categories is like this. If you're running a home-based business and no one is going to be coming to your home for the purpose of doing business with you, then you're not going to have to worry about a zoning license, most likely. All right, because your zoning licenses cover situations where, but let me back up. Zoning permits are really about how you can use a building, right? And so if I have a home office in my house, and that's what you mean by home-based business, like I am, on the phone with clients, I am doing my work on my laptop, I am, creating or finishing projects from my home office, and no one comes to, visit me or hold meetings or anything at my home, then I'm not doing anything that, kind of steps outside of what I'm allowed to do within my own home in terms of from a zoning perspective. But if I'm running a business where I'm going to be serving clients at my home, or if I'm running a business where I'm going to be manufacturing products, depending on what those products are, or where I am doing what's the word I'm looking for? Where I'm preparing food at my home, for, let's say, for catering purposes, or I'm holding events at my home. These are situations where those activities step outside of what you would typically be able to do in your home, or what you would typically do just within your home from a zoning perspective. So those are the types of things where if you're operating a home-based business that kind of steps outside of that, just like I have an office and a business that operates virtually, those are the situations where you need to think about getting a zoning permit for the work that you're doing from home. Evie, do you have anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, so I mean, so yeah, you're spot on, of course. I would say, the one thing, even if you don't require a zoning permit for a home-based business, a virtual one such as consulting, if you might want to look at your mortgage terms. So this is not a licensing thing, but if you have terms in your mortgage that stipulate that you have to only use your home as your primary residence, and that you're not allowed to use it for business purposes, it's worth taking a look. I personally have a second mortgage that has that requirement in it. It's just something I was made aware of when I bought my house. But if you're not sure, and maybe if you rent, or just it doesn't hurt to just check in to make sure that not only are you meeting any sort of licensing requirements, or you don't need to meet licensing requirements, making sure that you're not violating the agreement of your home, your mortgage, or your lease agreement. So just make sure you're taking a look at that as well to make sure that you're staying above board in all sense.
That's a great point. What other questions do we have? I know there's no way that I answered every question that folks had within the presentation. If there are any other questions, now is definitely the time to ask. Most attorneys charge in 6-minute increments. I don't, but my time still typically isn't free. So, take advantage. If you have any questions about business licensing, now's the time.
And I'd also love to hear from folks attending, what kind of business are you looking to start? Is it a daycare? Is it a consulting business, as one person has already pointed out? Are you starting a barber shop? We'd love to hear what kinds of businesses you're looking to start or have already started. So that way we can, try to direct you to the kinds of resources you might need, whether it be business licensing or something else.
All right, so promoting small business owners from the Philly area. Gotcha.
seems some of you might be still in the idea phase. Maybe you haven't actually started your business yet, but you're thinking about it, and you want to know what to expect before you get started. So that's okay too. But yeah, we're definitely open to questions. If you want to either put them in the chat if you don't want to speak out loud. Also, you can always email us after the fact, and we'll be happy to follow up with you one-on-one.
Yeah. So as Evie said, a lot of you might be, in the idea phase, which I think it's great that you're thinking about, kind of all aspects of getting your business started, including business licensing, when, kind of putting together and planning out and mapping out how you start up your business. And so, the floor is still open if anyone has any questions. But I am going to just move to the last slide, which is just my contact info. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. We'll make sure Evie's information is in the chat at the top. So definitely feel free to reach out to her as well. And then I see we have another comment in the chat, freelance artist and went to sell art outside your home. Okay, awesome. Are you planning to sell, when you say art outside your home, are you planning to sell it art shows or events, or what sort of, if you don't mind me asking, what's the kind of plans in terms of selling the art that you create? How do you envision that? Okay, events, vending, etc. Gotcha. So definitely something for you to be aware of, and I don't think I touched on it specifically, is that if you're ever thinking about putting together an event on your own, you should definitely think about where you're putting the event together at, and whether or not you'll need a permit for the actual event. That's something that permits are typically required for, depending on what sort of activity is going on at the event and where the event's being held. Definitely if the event's being held in a place that requires any sort of city resources, like if it's at a city park, or if there's going to be if you're requiring the city's help in trash collection or anything of that nature after the event, or if if it's a block party, obviously those are things where you'll need the city's okay and go ahead before holding those, just to make sure everything is good to go. But then obviously if you're at other folks' events, that's something for them to worry about and not so much you. But definitely. And then let's see, do zoning licenses apply the same to nonprofit? The answer to that question is yes. So zoning permits apply equally to nonprofits. I'm not sure. I know for a lot of business licenses and permits, nonprofits may get a break on some of those. Certainly not all of them, but I know some of them nonprofits aren't required to pay the same fees that a for-profit business would. Evie might know a little bit better, where that applies and where that doesn't. But nonprofits are still subject to the same zoning requirements as for-profit businesses are, same as individuals would be as well.
Yeah, so if a nonprofit's operating, let's say, a shelter for at-risk youth or something like that, they would be held to the same zoning permitting standards, as well as other licenses required to, house people, just as much as a business would. Now, nonprofits can get exemptions for taxes, like city taxes and things like that, even sales tax if they're purchasing equipment for their nonprofit. But I do believe that they would be held to many of the same licensing requirements that a business would be. But you would definitely want to check in with the Office of Business Services. If you have a nonprofit as well as a business, they will also be able to help you figure out what the licensing requirements would be, depending on what your nonprofit is actually doing.
Awesome. Well, again, I want to thank everyone for coming out this morning. I appreciate you all joining us for today's presentation. I don't know, I'm sure Evie has a couple of things that she wants to say to wrap up while we have a couple minutes, but I just wanted to thank everyone. And again, we'll be sending out the handout kind of as a recap and something for you to look back on in terms of knowing what's out there for you and getting the help and figuring out what your licensing requirements are. And then I will also include in that email that is sent out just a link to a quick survey, just giving us any feedback on the on today's presentation and how it was and how helpful you felt it was and how we might be able to make it more helpful in the future. So if you would just take 30 to 60 seconds to fill that out as well, we would definitely appreciate that feedback. But other than that, that's all I have. Thanks again, and I'll turn it over to Evie for final closing remarks.
Yeah, I mean, just thank you so much, Zane. This was a very, very informative presentation. I know that we didn't have as many folks show up as we thought, but we're going to make this available online so that everyone who missed the presentation and anyone else, if you want to share this with your friends, anyone else that you know is starting a business, please do. We want this information to be out there for everyone so that people are able to start their businesses more smoothly, that they don't get deterred or discouraged by the process. We want more businesses and more small businesses in Philadelphia. That's our ultimate goal here. So we want to make sure this information is shared as widely as possible. And so thank you for participating. We really wish you best of luck with your business licensing adventure. Again, if you have any other legal needs for your business, contracts, getting your LLC, please use the application in the chat or send me an email. My information is also in the chat. We can follow up with you one-on-one. So keep an eye out for that handout and that feedback survey from Zane in the next couple of days, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.